Welcome to the Jerome McClain Show. I'm your host, Jerome McClain, and let's get into our episode.
Intelligentsia, the endem of sarcasm, the nutty professor, to your whack-ass marmalade. It's T-Bone from T-Bone and Chick Brew in the morning. Now available in podcast format. Simply search for the T-Bone and Chick Brew podcast, available wherever fine podcasts are sold.
Welcome to the Jerome McClain Show. I'm your host, Jerome McClain. Independent media that won't reinforce tribalism. We have one planet. Nobody is leaving, so let us reason together. Have the blessing of being able to be coming to you today from the beautiful Buena Vista, Virginia, basically in Lexington, Virginia, at the lovely farm. And let us reason together. It started off the way we used to do in the very beginning of the program, get back to our roots, kicking it old school, as they say, with the quote of the day. Every time you speak, you have a choice. Every time you speak, you have a choice. That quote comes from the late Dr. Bell Hooks. Let's get into the episode. I'm going to start off with something that I need to say very clearly. You can believe in freedom of speech and still understand that not every criticism deserves to be treated morally seriously. If someone still defends the Confederacy, makes excuses for fascism, Nazis, still accuse blatant racism, misogyny, sexism, anti-Semitism, homophobia, etc., and other human form of degradation when it comes from their side, I am not obligated to treat their criticisms of my heroes, my thinkers, my leaders, or my community as though it's coming from some deep well of moral concern. Because at some point, their morality is not morality. It is tribal loyalty dressed up in moral language. They do not have standards, they have teams. They do not object to wrongdoings, they object to wrongdoing by the wrong people doing it. So yes, they have the right to speak, but freedom of speech does not mean freedom from discernment. It does not mean I must pretend every bad faith critic is wisdom and every bad take critique is wisdom. It does not mean I have to sit at the feet of people whose outrage only activates when it benefits their tribe. Apply their own standard back to them. When they ignore the sins of their heroes, do not let them weaponize selective morality against yours. Criticism from principled people should be heard. Criticism from tribal hypocrites should be weighed accordingly. Now, let me get into why I say this. I am perplexed, not really, but perplexed in this sense of people who will dig under every rock and every crevice of anybody that you bring up as a hero or somebody you admire, and then have the most nuance it takes ever when it comes to people who are blatant monsters, and not even current people who died 100 years ago, etc., etc. And I know that this is a trick that people use in order to try to muddy the waters of a conversation so much that it seems like everybody is on the same plane. It works as if to play with the theological that we all know. Let thee who is out sin cast the first stone. But they do only apply that to you and not to them. Because when you can go and look at, especially because we're all social media creatures now, criticisms that they have, you see they are selective. The outrage is selective. The morality is selective. And it is tribally selective. Please listen to the critique, but carry the critique with a grain of salt if it is not equally applied. And that is something that I noticed. I noticed the New York Times talking about Cesar Chavez, and the second the people brought up the criticism of Cesar Chavez, which is every human being is not perfect, all of a sudden his name gets taken off of everything left, right, into the in the middle. Then again, this is at the same time that the United States of America and the current leadership that we have are going back in time and retroactively putting back names of Confederate generals all over the place on military bases who have done and did do worse things than Cesar Chavez would have even imagined. Which leads me to think, now what's the difference between that leader and those leaders? The issue is, as they would say, skin deep. I look at how certain people have every criticism for somebody like Martin Luther King and then cover up every single moral failing of somebody like Donald John Trump. And then they'll say, well, it's about the occupation. It is not. It's not about the occupation. It's about the standard that you are failing to apply to your own side. Let thee who is out sin cast first stone. If you have the ability to obfuscate and make an excuse for every moral failing of this person, your criticisms of somebody who's been dead for this long, I wonder why you are going in the past to constantly drudge up sins of somebody who is long gone. And then I look at the people that you admire, and they did far worse, far often, never repented. It did not have to be, they did not have to be spied on by the racist FBI and the pathetic racist J. Edgar Hoover. It was done blatantly. So, some people's criticisms I do not take seriously, and I will not take seriously. I take seriously their humanity. I do not take seriously their moral clarity and their indignation, because their indignation is not righteous. It is selective. Now let's get into this episode. So my latest piece is When Heaven Stops Listening, Why God Does Not Hear the Prayers of a Bloody Nation. Now I worked very hard on this one, and I thought about it for a very long time. And this was a direct response to the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, thinking that God blesses and does not bless certain things. I do agree with him, but I agree with him in a way that will not be flattering if he heard it. There comes a time when a nation must ask a terrifying question: what if God is not impressed by our prayers? Not because prayer is weak, not because God is deaf, not because heaven has gone silent, but because the nation praying has gone fluent in religious language while remaining stubbornly committed to violence, greed, hypocrisy, bloodshed, and empire. And that is not liberal talking. That is not conservative talking. That's the Bible that a lot of the people keep quoting, clearly do not read. The prophets were not sentimental men. They did not walk into public squares saying, well, at least the nation has traditional values. They did not say, at least the king mentioned God in the speech. They did not say, at least the priests are still singing hymns. The prophets looked at nations, kings, armies, marketplaces, courts, temples, altars, and asked one brutal question: is there righteousness in the land? Because if there is no righteousness in the land, then all the prayers in the world become noise. And the prophet Isaiah said it plainly. And when ye hear forth your hands, I will hide my eyes from ye. When you make many prayers, I will not hear. Your hands are full of blood. This is a verse America does not want to read out loud. We love God bless America. We love to sing and invoke religious stuff, but we do not love your hands are full of blood. I would dare say most Americans have not heard that verse. Americans love if my people who are called by my name, but we do not love I will not hear. We love chaplains and inaugurations, prayers before congressional sessions, Bible verses after tragedies, and politicians ending speeches with God bless the United States of America. But the Bible gives us a category for a nation that prays with blood on its hands, and the terrible truth is God does not have to receive a prayer just because it contains religious vocabulary. A nation cannot mention God constantly and still be living in a way that makes heaven turn its face. This is where we are. I am convinced of it. God does not hear the prayers of the United States of America when those prayers are offered as patriotic incense over a pile of violated bodies. God does not hear us when we pray for peace while funding war. God does not hear us when we pray for children while destroying children in the womb, abandoning children in poverty, traumatizing children in schools, and explaining away dead children overseas as collateral damage. God does not hear us when we ask for safety while worshiping weapons. God does not hear us when we ask for moral clarity while calling every atrocity committed by our allies complicated. The Bible has a word for that, and so does everybody else. Hypocrisy. And God is not obligated to answer the prayers of hypocrites. The Bible gives us a theology around unheard prayer. We often speak as if every prayer automatically rises to the throne of God with equal moral standing. But if you read the Christian scriptures, it's far more severe than that. The Bible does not teach that prayer is magic. It teaches that prayer is covenantal. Prayer is not a way to manipulate God. It is a way to come before God truthfully. That means a lying people cannot expect truthful communion with a holy God. Again, the prophet Isaiah says, behold, the Lord's hands has not shortened, that it cannot save, neither is his ear heavy, that it cannot hear. But your iniquities have separated between you and your God, and your sins has hid his face from you, that he will not hear you. Notice the point. God is not weak. God is not distant because he lacks power. God is not silent because he lacks hearing. The problem is the moral separation. The problem is the sin. The problem is the iniquity that has become institutional, cultural, legal, and normal. God says through Jeremiah, the prophet Jeremiah, therefore pray not thou for these people, for I will not hear thee. Again, though they shall cry unto me, I will not hearken unto them. Again from Jeremiah, when they fast, I will not hear their cry. Let's go to the prophet Ezekiel. Though they will cry in my ears with a loud voice, yet I will not hear them. Let's go to the prophet Micah. Then they shall cry unto the Lord, but he will not hear them. Let's go to the prophet Zechariah. As he cried, and they would not hear, so they cried, and I will not hear, saith the Lord of hosts. Let's go to Proverbs. He that turneth away his ear from the hearing of the law, even his prayer shall be an abomination. Let's go to the Psalms. If I regard iniquity in my heart, the Lord will not hear me. This is not an obscure doctrine buried in one strange verse. This is thick biblical witness. God refuses prayer when prayer becomes a substitute for repentance. America wants prayer without repentance, and that is our crisis. We do not want to turn away from the bloodshed. We want to find a chaplain to bless the battlefield. We do not want to turn away from the greed. We want to find a preacher to baptize our capitalism. We do not want to turn away from our imperialism. We want God to bless our foreign policy violence. We want God to protect our troops, our borders, our markets, our interests, our allies, our myths of innocence. Keyword, myth in a sense. But God is not a mascot for any country. God is not an eagle, nor is God a flag. And God is not a chaplain of empire. God is holy. You are not. He is not obligated to hear your prayers when you come to him incorrectly as hypocrites, liars, swindlers, etc. And holy means God does not clap along while nations shed blood and call it strategy. Your hands are full of blood. Isaiah's indictment begins with blood, not bad branding, not poor messaging, not failure to be bipartisan. Blood. Your hands are full of blood, Isaiah says. A nation with bloody hands can still have churches. A nation with bloody hands can still have hymns. A nation with bloody hands can still have prayer breakfasts, religious voters, public invocations, Christian publishing houses, and politicians who quote scripture badly before voting for something demonic and wicked. The question is not whether America has religious language or whether America has religions. The question is whether America religious is righteous. And the evidence is not very flattering. So let us begin where many Christians are rightly uncomfortable. Abortion. According to Gutmacher's 2026 fact sheets, U.S. clinicians provided an estimated 1,126,000 abortions in 2025, roughly unchanged from 2024 and up from 2020, the last year of comprehensive national estimate before the Dobbs decision. The CDC's official surveillance estimate reported 613,383 abortions from 2022 from 48 reported areas, but that number is limited by reported gaps and does not count every abortion nationally. Now let us be honest. If an unborn child is a human life made in the image of God, this is not merely a policy disagreement. It's blood. It is national blood. It is legal blood. It is profitable blood. It is blood wrapped in slogans about choice, freedom, privacy, autonomy, and healthcare. But I refuse to let the pro-life movement stop the moral audit there, because I've been around the pro-life movement for a lot of years, and I have noticed, unfortunately, some people only care about unborn children until they are born poor, born black, born undocumented, born Palestinian, born Yemeni, born from Afghan, born from Iraq, born into neighborhoods with lead pipes, born into schools with metal detectors, and born into houses where rent eats the whole paycheck. That is not a biblical pro-life theology. That is a political branding with sonogram pictures. If Isaiah says your hands are full of blood, then America must answer for abortions, yes, but America must also answer for war. Brown University's Cost of War Project estimates that more than 940,000 people were killed by direct violence in post 9/11 war zones through 2023, including more than 432,000 civilians. It also notes that indirect deaths from destroyed health systems, economics, infrastructure, and environments are far higher than that number that I just said.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Has anybody ever told you you were over opinionated? How about this one? You can talk about everything you like, but don't talk about religion. Don't talk about faith. Don't talk about politics. My name is Jerome McClain, host of Jerome McClain Show, and I want to introduce you to a show called Over Opinionated with my friend from Southwest Virginia, Josh Scott. Josh has always been told he has been over-opinionated. He always tried to hold back these opinions, but he tried to back them up when he had to say something with facts and logic. Since he's grown up in many ways, he had to change a lot of his views and his opinions, as a lot of people should. He's not a millionaire from Fox News or CNN. He's just a hard-working, blue-collar type of guy. Give Josh Scott a shot at Over Opinionated with Josh Scott. You can find him on patreon.com/overopinionated at 679. You can also check him out on Twitter at NRV_guy79. Overopinionated with Josh Scott, where he is this soft-spoken guy telling you the truth. We talk about a lot of serious topics on this show. One very serious topic is women's health. One company that stood out to me was vslay.com because the owner is very transparent about her own struggles in the women's health department and has great customer service, great deals, and frequent sales. You can check her out, her great customer service, products about women's health, and frequent sales at www.vslay.com. That is www.vslay.com. That means a nation can say, Lord, hear our prayers, and God will not hear it. Because a nation cannot say, Lord, hear our prayers, while stepping over the bodies of innocent people in Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Syria, Yemen, Somalia, Libya, Gaza, as if geography makes grief less sacred. A dead child in Mosul is not less dead because an American spokesperson used the phrase precision strike. A dead family in Yemen is not less dead because the weapon was sold illegally. A dead Palestinian child is not less dead because someone said the word human shield. A dead unborn child is not less dead because someone said the word choice. God is not fooled by the vocabulary of the powerful. God hears Abel's blood crying from the ground. That's in the Old Testament, by the way. And if Abel's blood cries from the ground, what do you think the blood of millions of dead, innocent people does when God hears it? I'll leave that thought with you. Collateral damage is not a biblical category. Collateral damage is not a biblical category, a biblical category. And it does not mean that the perpetrators are innocent. One of the most wicked phrases in modern politics is the word collateral damage. It is a phrase designed to help the comfortable sleep. It is how empires keep its conscience sedated as it turns its grandmother into unfortunate consequences. It turns a child into a statistical inconvenience. It turns a wedding party into a targeting error. It turns a hospital into a tragic misunderstanding. It turns a city into a theater of operations. But scripture does not allow us to hide murder behind management language. Proverbs says this: who stoppeth his ears at the cry of the poor, he also shall cry himself, but shall not be heard. The same principle applies. The cry of the bomb, the displaced, the occupied, the orphaned, and the widowed. If we stop our ears at their cry, God will stop his ears at ours. And this is why the human shield argument must be handled with moral sobriety. International humanitarian law clearly prohibits using civilians as human shields. The ICRC identifies human shielding as prohibited practice, and it also emphasizes that states and parties to the conflict must respect and ensure respect for humanitarian law in all circumstances. The principles of distinction and proportionality remain central. Civilians do not lose their moral worth because wicked people operate near them. That means we can condemn Hamas for October 7th, hostage-taking, attacks on civilians, and using civilian areas for military purposes, while also refusing to pretend that Israel or any other state that receives money from us, and by us, I mean the United States of America, that money gives them a blank check to turn neighborhoods into graveyards. The United States cannot hide behind allied language when the U.S. money, U.S. weapons, U.S. diplomatic cover and U.S. veto power helped sustain the violence. The Council on Foreign Relations reports that since the start of the Israeli war with Hamas on October 7, 2023, the United States has enacted legislation providing at least $16.3 billion in direct military aid to Israel, in addition to $3.8 billion per year under the existing aid framework. The United Nations Human Rights Office has reported, and this was in November 2024, that nearly 70% of verified facilities in Gaza were, that verified fatalities in Gaza were women and children. 70% of verified fatalities in Gaza were women and children, while Israeli officials have repeatedly argued that Hamas embedded itself among civilians and uses civilian infrastructure. This is exactly where moral theology must not become cowardly. If a terrorist hides behind a child, the terrorist is guilty. But if the state kills the child and then congratulates itself for killing the terrorist too, heaven is not required to applaud, and nor am I. A child is not a footnote in a military strategy or military necessity. A child is not a regrettable cause of geopolitical alignment. A child is not a public relations problem. A child is an image bearer of God. And if America funds, excuses, arms, protects, rationalizes the killing of image bearers, then America should not be shocked when God says, when you make prayers, I will not hear. Now, the piece that I wrote was over 5,000 words. That was just a flavor of it. If you get the flavor of what I'm saying and you agree, you can go and get the piece. It is free on the Substack. Just Google the name Darrell McClain. The Substack will be there. It's I'm on Facebook, Instagram. I am purposely not behind a paywall because I have no interest in hiding knowledge. God has richly blessed me, and so I have no interest in hiding the knowledge. I have, for the sake of this debate about God, etc., not only put numbers towards some atrocities, I have also layered the piece with Bible verse after Bible verse after Bible verse to back up my claim. And this also ties into what I am working on, which, Lord willing, the book will be released around December, of course, right around the time for stocking stuffing. And I want people to be wrestling with these truths while they think about the Savior's birthday. But I am going to get into some other criticisms. But again, if you want to check out the piece that I wrote, this was released on yesterday, free for anybody that is interested, on Substack, and it is titled "When Heaven Stops Listening: Why God Does Not Hear the Prayers of a Bloody Nation." Right back with more on the Darrell McClain Show.
Some of the qualities of the right, the far right, have come back to bite them in the ass in a glorious way. This is a classic example of your racism backfiring spectacularly. Okay? So, as you all know, Vivek Ramaswamy is running for governor of Ohio. And honestly, everybody thought he was kind of a shoo-in. Ohio is basically a red state these days. They're basically just a red state at this point. And he thought, oh, for sure, I'll win. I made a name for myself running for president. And, Trump supports me. And, what can go wrong? Well, what can go wrong is a massive blue wave environment, number one. The other thing that could go wrong is you're brown and you're functionally trying to be a leader in a white nationalist party. Okay, that's what it is. Let's just call it what it is. That's what it is. Well, here we have a great example. This guy, Joel Webon, and he's a pastor, and he has some thoughts for us on Vivek as governor of Ohio. Here we go.
If he becomes the governor of Ohio, you have solidified Vivek's political career for the rest of his life in America. He's not going away.
Exactly.
This is the chance to say, no, never, ever go back home. Get out of our country. You were born in America, sure, by days. Your dad hates our country, never took the time to become a citizen. You're an anchor baby. Your family built their wealth by robbing white people with miracle drugs that you knew were not going to be viable. You became a billionaire. You paid your way onto every podcast. You've been lying. You've been deceiving. And this is not American. You are not American. You are a Hindu.
Now, I have to interrupt. First off, Joe Webbin is a charlatan as well. And I'll just say this. When he got to that miracle drug stuff, does he have the same criticism of, I don't know, Alex Jones, who sells miracle drugs for years that everybody knows, who's in the fitness industry like me, does not work? Does he have the same criticism of every single right-wing podcast who hawks supplements that everybody in the fitness industry that I'm in knows do not work? Does he have the same criticism of every right-wing podcast who sells people false hopes of Bitcoin, etc., that's nothing more than a scam? He does not. I follow his work. I listen to him. He does not. His criticisms, as I said earlier, only land because they are selective, based on skin.
You are a polytheist. You are a false idol worshiper. Go home. Get out of our country. I don't care about you quoting Thomas Jefferson. I don't care about you pretending to honor the founders. This is America. We wear shoes in this country. We eat beef in this country. We worship Christ exclusively in this country. We don't rob people of their wealth in this country. Get the hell out.
We don't rob people of their wealth in this country. Says somebody who's obviously never looked at any economic report. This is fairly easy. There's a show on CSNBC, not a very liberal network, called American Greed. And this is about documented scams that have happened in the United States of America that were caught by the Fraternal Bureau of Investigations. I suggest that somebody tell Pastor Webbin to check that out and see if we steal things in the United States of America. I might as well point out the low-hanging fruit that the United States of America, like every settler colonial society, but we're going to stick with America, was stolen land. And not only was America a stolen land, we then went to countries and stole people to work on the land for free. And then we spent years systematically saying that said people who we stole to work on the land were not people to justify us stealing them. We then, after air quote, freeing the people that we stole, wrote laws and legislation to make sure the people could never benefit from so-called freedom that they had just gotten. Did I skip over the fact that in order to get the freedom, there had to be a war fought that killed well over 500,000 Americans? And then even after that, we came up with this thing called policing, and you can do your own research, which people want, how the first police came into being, what they were initially used for, Fugitive Slave Act, yada, yada, yada. Some people know the history because that's their history. Other people know other histories because they are brainwashed by the school system to always pretend like their side is innocent of ever doing anything wrong. So, Joe Webbin, please, please. I don't even know why anybody would say this. Yes, I do. A demon-possessed liar. Demon-possessed liar.
That's the proper response.
Oh, my word. Oh, my word. Christian nationalist pastor Joel Webbon declares that Vivek Ramaswamy must be demolished in the Ohio election to send a message to the GOP that, quote, polytheistic, demon-worshipping, cow-worshipping, bare feet scamming anchor baby Indians will not be tolerated. Oh, my days. Vivek, what happened, bro? I thought you were a hero to these people. I thought they loved you. I thought MAGA was all about, like, colorblindness and stuff, bro. They're not racist, right, bro? Oops. Turns out you were wrong, and the liberals and the leftists were right, weren't we? Oh, my days. So, as is pointed out here by Hermit Mehta, who's the friendly atheist, he says, love it when their racism backfires on Republicans. Look, the fact of the matter is, there is a strong contingent of Republicans that are so racist that if they look at a brown candidate who nominally shares their ideas versus a white liberal male who doesn't share their ideas, but he's white, there's enough racist, open racists now in the Republican Party where plenty of them will be like, I'm going to either sit it out or vote for the white guy. That's what it is, right? That's what it is. And the thing is, you don't even need that many of these people to do that in order for him to lose. You already have a blue wave year. So it's already a tough road for Republicans. Mix that in with what? Let's say 5%, 10% of Republican voters are so racist, they either sit it out because he's brown, or some of them vote for the Democrat. You're cooked. You're done. It's over. It's a wrap. And like, don't say we didn't warn you. Don't say we didn't warn you. Whenever I see MAGA people of color, there's like an extra level of delusion there, right? Like, what do you think? You really think like, oh, I'm one of the good ones. They'll accept me. The fuck they will. Of course they won't. Why would they? Only insofar as you are useful to their agenda. That's it. That's it. As long as you're saying the things that they want to hear, sure, they'll tolerate you, but they'll never fully accept you. And the fact of the matter is the Republican base has gone further and further to the right. They've become more and more fascist. They've become more and more white nationalists. That now, it used to be the case, you could be racist in the Republican Party, but you have to pretend to be in favor of color blindness. That used to be the thing. Now, they've reached the point where it's like, no, we're not even pretending anymore with the color blindness shit. Now we say, like, we want to preserve this nation as a white nation. Now they say that shit aloud. Now they say shit like remigration, which is a Nazi idea. They just say it out loud. Now they say, hey, I want a white country. Like, that's what I want. I don't want to allow in any immigrants, illegal or legal. This is what they say. And so now, you're doing the whole like early 2000s shtick of a Republican, and that's outdated. Sorry, it's no longer Ben Shapiro time. It's now Nick Fuentes time. And you can't keep up simply because of who you are. And all that fucking, excusing you did and all the obfuscation you did and the rationalization you did for the Republican Party is coming to bite you in the ass. Because everything every critic of the Republicans ever said to you was true. They'll never accept you. They're racist at their core. It's part of their ideology. Doesn't matter if you agree with them on all the other shit. They will kick your ass to the curb instantly simply because you're brown. Simply because you're Hindu. Doesn't matter how much, I'm a cultural Christian or like I like quoting the founding fathers. They don't give a fuck about that. By the way, the only legitimate criticism here is that it's true. He is a scammer. He absolutely is a scammer. He committed a scam. They absolutely committed. Go read about that shit. They committed a fucking scam with like some fake medicine ass shit. Terrible, terrible stuff. But bro, their racism is biting them in the ass. And it's never been more clear. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop. And watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.
So before I get into the next clip, of course, in order to talk about back to the quote that I had in the very beginning of the show, and I mean the quote in the very beginning of the show came from me, which I'll say again, just in case we have short memories, which, because I know Americans, we do. I'll say this again. When I talked about what I am obligated and not obligated to do, if someone still defends Confederacies, still excuse blatant racism, misogyny, sexism, anti-Semitism, homophobia, and every other human form of degradation when it comes to their side, I am not obligated to treat their criticism of my heroes, my thinkers, my leaders, my community as though it comes from some deep well of moral concern. Joe Webbin was an adamant supporter of Donald Trump, who is known for nothing more before he ran for president as a gigantic scam artist. It is a part of the public record. He has been sued multiple times over his long life and has lost multiple times. There are depositions that you can go look at where he clearly knows he scammed. And one thing I can say that's very true about the Donald Trump that is in public versus the Donald Trump when he goes to court and was under deposition, the Donald Trump under deposition did not lie. Trump University, scam. Trump steak, Trump vodka, yada, yada, yada. Scam, 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 scam. In the Trump orbit, it is regularly seen that everybody around him goes to jail for actual crimes. Actual. Because they are smart enough in the criminal organization to fall on the sword of the boss. He was the boss. They fell on the sword of the boss. He protected them. You can go look. You can say all the silly stuff on the FBI, which yada, 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 whatever. It was documented for decades, and it was proven for decades. Lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit from actual successful businesses that he was scamming, losing case after case for decades. Did Joe Webbin, with a straight face, was to say America is not a place for fraudsters is stupidity. Not just stupidity, a blatant lie. Unless I say something obvious here, what makes this crazy to me is, of course, Joe Webbin is a pastor. Pastor, not just a pastor in the Reformed community, of which I somewhat sit, who has all these criticisms for people like John Piper. But look at what the type of stuff he says. You should take people like him as serious as you take the people who used to say cigarettes were healthy. And to stick to this point about all these things, this is extremely crazy to me, because even though, of course, we've seen this before, it does not necessarily mean that it is true. From all the indications that I have seen, from the historical way that it works, there goes Virginia, normally goes the country. So what I mean by that is, historically speaking, if the Virginia governor is different from the president that won the previous election, the president and is going to lose in the midterms. So the president, Donald John Trump, won the 2024, 2025 election. I'm blanking here. It is 1:56 a.m. while I'm recording this. And then Abigail Spanberger, the former CIA person, and people know how I feel about the CIA and the FBI, yada, yada. But anyway, the Democrat won Virginia. Historically speaking, that means the party in power is now about to lose, because Virginia has traditionally been considered what we call a purple state. Virginia, because they have an equal amount of Republicans and Democrats, even though I am somebody who really believes that people in the rural areas of Virginia need more representation. But Virginia is a state that regularly switches from red to blue, red to blue, red to blue. so much that it's considered purple. Unlike Florida, that's a solidly red state, so Democratic votes don't matter in Florida. California is a solidly blue state, so Republican votes don't matter in California. People's votes do actually matter in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Sorry to say it that way. I don't even really think voting matters at this point for other reasons. That's a complicated conversation. But strategically, historically, that's what I mean. Even though every indicator points that there's going to be a massive blue wave, it doesn't matter. It does not matter because he's not the right color. That is crazy to me. It's not crazy in the sense of I don't know that it's coming. I'm a student of history. It's crazy with how much racism must operate at the forefront of Joe Webbin's brain.
So we have some new fairly bombshell reporting from Atlas Intel, which, if I'm not mistaken, Sagar, was the most accurate pollster both in 2020 and in 2024. So let's go ahead and put this piece up on the screen here with regard to the midterms. So this is what they call the generic ballot. They say just like, okay, Democrat versus Republican, not putting specific candidates in. Who do you prefer? The Democrats are winning here by 14.5 points on the generic ballot for the House. That is a shocking margin. You know, all the concerns, justified concerns about the way maps are being redrawn, et cetera. Like, you are not, if Democrats are winning the national vote by something approaching 14 points, there is no amount of map changes, there is no amount of ice at the polls that is going to truly be too big to rig in terms of taking control of the House. And, you know, poll after poll shows it's not that people love the Democrats. The Democrats have a lot of work to do to reclaim any sort of decent brand with the American people. It's just that they are utterly disgusted with the Republicans, with Donald Trump specifically. And Sagar, it does have some credibility given the fact not only Atlas's track record, but given what we've seen in all of these special elections. 15 points is the average, roughly the average shift toward Democrats that we've seen in all of these seats. So, you know, that gives it some credibility. Again, it's an outlier. I want to make that clear, but it does give those numbers some credibility, given that when people have actually gone and voted, this is roughly what we have seen.
Let's start with that. So remember, special election is the most predictive of midterms. It is by far going back many, many years for what's actually going to happen. Then we can start to look at some of the polls and their past track record. Now, you're absolutely right. 2022 and 2024, Atlas Intel was A+, was within 2.2 points of the general 2024 electorate. It was the most accurate of that year. However, what we also learned is that Iowa Seltzer poll, traditional track record, can be wrong. So let's put all those caveats. But I think whenever you combine the two things, you could say a general trend in this direction, unless it's some sort of Seltzer-esque, crazy misfire. But, when I take a look actually at the issue by issue, that's where I really start to see huge problems for the Republicans. Let's put D2 up there on the screen from Atlas. Now lead on every major issue. Trump's two strongest areas are D+9 and D+7. This is from immigration and for defense. But at the very, very top, this is usual. Environment and education and healthcare. Democrats usually are there. But this is where it gets interesting. Employment and job market and inflation and cost of living. These are two areas for very traditional Republican strongholds. You have +15, +17 Democratic preference. Trade policy and tariffs. You also have another shift towards the Democrats at +13. Foreign policy, immigration, taxes even, you have a +8. Crime at +3 for Dems. So things are absolutely insane when Dems are getting +3 whenever it comes to crime. Maybe a lot of people are taking all these headlines about these white-collar pardons. Wouldn't be surprised to me.
True.
If it were, I'm being dead serious in terms of how they're thinking.
Honestly, the lowest number of white collar prosecutions in history happening right now.
Right.
under the Trump
And there
regime.
has been a
Selling
massive
cards.
decline in the murder rate. So if you put those two things together, you're not as worried about violence. Then you also have this white-collar prosecution. It wouldn't shock me. But I think what it comes down to is a rejection at the mass level, very similar to how the public reacted after Obama was president for a year. There are a lot of reasons largely for that, but it culminated in that huge wipeout, the shellacking of 2010. And I think, well, first of all, the problem with this is it all presumes that Trump cares at all about their chances, which it just doesn't seem like they care. Like anybody who cares about their midterm election chances is not saying things which we led our show about. I don't care or think about Americans' financial situation at all, right? So this is where I'm like, I genuinely think that they have given up entirely on the domestic front, like completely. This is the only thing that can explain the sheer obsession with Venezuela, 51st state, the reflecting pool, the ballroom, Iran. That's all they really have any control over. The rest of the party has a political future. He doesn't care. He only cares about the future, but he's going to drag it down with him, because the one last thing that we have to be clear on with the Republicans is, while many people are fleeing the Republican Party, in particular, many of these independent or swing voters, not just swing, non-identified Trump voters, the actual Republican base is all in for Trump. I mean, do you remember very recently, these Indiana Senate races that were happening, where some of these Indiana Republicans crossed Trump? They all lost, okay? So the actual MAGA people, they're still all in. And that's just a caveat that I want to make very clear. Like, Trump is still the chief of the declining. In fact, it might be more powerful, because at this point, if you're still all in for Trump, there's literally nothing he can do, including shooting someone on Fifth Avenue, for which they will decline. And so that actually leads a very good place, I think, for the Democratic Party. I would compare it, I'm trying to think, maybe the 1970s, where, like, McGovern, this is a good example. So the 1970s, the entire, post Watergate Democratic Party was having a tough time, especially after Jimmy Carter, kind of figuring out like what we're going to do. And what they did is it opened up this huge space for, remember the Reagan Democrat? That was like a thing back in the 1980s. Really what it was an inverse rejection of kind of the embrace of the new left and this identitarian, this Democratic Party which had no real identity. There was a very hardcore base of people who supported it, but not enough to create like a majority coalition, which is really what all these people decided to do when they voted for Reagan, even if some of them even didn't even agree with their policy. I would compare it now to the other. So you have a very, very small slice of the country, which is still very much all in and believing, but it leaves all of this open negative polarization space, which is the defining politics of our era, towards the Democratic Party. They not like them, but they don't like the Republicans at all. It kind of very similar to the 2024 dynamic. A lot of voters hated Biden. They didn't love Trump. They didn't like a lot of things about him. He still had a negative approval rating. We're still willing to vote for him in the end.
Yeah. I mean, you could also potentially compare it to, depending on how bad things get here with the Iran war and a possible global depression, you could also compare it with Herbert Hoover, and
we're not there yet. We're not there yet.
But that's a possibility, I mean, but that requires having that FDR-like figure who can have a really broad appeal, centered around, a sort of not only national patriotism, but also broadly shared prosperity was really the cornerstone of what he offered, obviously within the context that there was not completely shared by Black Americans, certainly Japanese internment camp, all the caveats notwithstanding, and very significant caveats at that. But, if you had that type of figure, I do think there's a possibility for that sort of coalition coming together. We get very used to this very narrow partisan victories when you have both politicians basically sort of playing to the culture wars and not really promising significant economic change in a way that's credible. And that part, the way that's credible, is the most significant part, because one of the biggest questions is whether you can get Americans to really believe in a big national project of any sort, given the level of humiliation and decline that we're suffering right now. But in any case, all of this, so you've got Republicans falling apart in terms of the national standing. Certainly the Trump coalition has broken down. His hard to score supporters are always going to be there with him, but it is a minority, somewhere around a third of the population. That is obviously not nearly enough to win House elections, when, even maintain control of the Senate, let alone hold on to the presidency in 2028. This poll from Atlas Intel was also very interesting on the Democratic side, and very different from what we've seen on other Democratic primary 2028, trial runs. So let's put this up on the screen. This is the first one that we've seen AOC leading the field with 26% of the vote. Next in line, you've got Pete at 22, Gavin at 21, Kamala down at 13, and then everybody else is pretty far below that. Andy Bashir 4, Cory Booker 4, none of the above 3, Shapiro 2, Whitmer 1, Walz 1, Khanna 1, Rahm Emanuel 0.6, and Westmore 0.4. So, look, again, it's an outlier, but it does add an interesting data point. AOC is very much seen as the heir to Bernie Sanders. She is seen as the vanguard of the left of the party, and the sort of inheritor of that legacy. What we've seen in primary contests around the country, and actually, if we can jump forward and put Abdul's numbers up here on the screen here, D5, is that the energy in the Democratic Party is very much with the left of the party in a way that it truly, in our lifetimes, has never been, including during the times when Bernie Sanders was running, where people liked Bernie, but they were worried, is he electable? I don't know. And there was kind of a limit to how far people were willing to go in terms of voting for him or voting for candidates who styled themselves in his image. That seems to be changing. We now have in the Michigan Senate race, Abdul El-Sayed is really surging here. We've got a new poll that has him emerging as the race's clear frontrunner, 28% support, ahead of Haley Stevens at 18 and State Senator Mallory McMorrow at 17%. So they're basically in a tie for second. And this is really stunning. They have him getting 80% of the support of voters between the ages of 18 and 44. So Gen Z and millennials, 80% support. Stevens is getting 4% and McMorrow is getting 3%. So massive, massive generational divide in terms of the view of this race. We can also look in terms of that left energy dominating the base of the party. Certainly Graham Plattner coming out of nowhere, having never run for anything before, and easily dispatching with the sitting governor of Maine, who was backed by the establishment of the Democratic Party. So, this poll showing AOC in the lead fits with that trend of voters in the base of the party looking around and going, okay, well, who is aligned with that Sanders wing? Who is going to stand up to corporate interests? Who is going to be different? And, I've got my concerns about AOC that I've voiced on this show previously. But in terms of voter perception of who she is and what her branding is, I think it's very consistent with the energy that we've seen behind Abdul El-Sayed and Graham Plattner.
It is interesting. I don't know. I just don't see her coming out of primary. I don't. She's not a good debater. She folded in Munich. She doesn't really, I don't know. What was the analogy you made about she always seems like she's studying for the test and looking for the right answer as opposed to having an answer that she already, that's really important for a politician. A lot of it right now is the idea of AOC as opposed to AOC, the politician. I agree with that. Right? Yeah, and I agree with that. You can't get through a primary through something like that, especially if you're going to be challenged. The one thing that I think this whole thing presumes is that Kamala's not going to run again, which I am not putting off the table. She very clearly does.
They have her in there, and she's led most of the polls. Yeah. She has led for Democratic primary trial runs. That's why this one is different. Right. But it had her at 13%. So still, garnering some support. But, I'm not that concerned for the same reason you're saying, like, you don't think AOC can come through a primary. I mean, I think Kamala has proven herself to not hold up well under public scrutiny. Yeah. So, I think even though she'll be able to come out and say, look, I warned you that I said this about Trump and I was right. Like, I warned you, I tried to tell you. And there continues to be a lot of warm feelings towards her, in certain parts of the party. But I'm not personally that concerned with that translating into a Kamala Harris primary.
The last thing I'll flag,
I don't think she'll hold up to scrutiny once
the
again.
last thing I'll flag, because we have our guest standing by, is the primary calendar here matters so much. It matters so much how that primary calendar is going to look like. And as far as I know, you can tell me, I don't think that it's yet set in stone. But if they go the traditional route, or at least the Biden route, where they wanted South Carolina and first, and without any of the Rust Belt or Nevada, any of these places where Bernie did really well, remember, it can significantly skew the way things go. And I wouldn't put it past the DNC after what they've pulled with this Biden autopsy and everything that they've done. And I mean, remember, before what's her name, Mills dropped out against Plattner, the Schumer and them were going all in for them. So I would not put it past them whatsoever to nominate or to rig the scales, rig the system in favor of a Gavin or Kamala if it were somebody like that. So that's my last flag for people, because it's so
They're gonna
hard
try.
to overcome.
They're going to try. I just think it's going to be difficult to do what they did in the past, because just like with the Mills race, people were like, oh, you're Schumer's candidate. That means I'm definitely not voting for you. And the ability to manufacture consent with the media outlets is really severely degraded too by the rise of independent media and also by the degradation of trust in mainstream liberal outlets.
Yeah,
so
good.
Look, doing shows can be somewhat a weird thing, because I have so much to say and think about yada 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 right now. Yeah, I am so fired up. There's so much I want to talk about. But because I'm a psychology major, I know how human nature works. And weirdly, either humans can listen to something for 30 minutes, an hour, or 4 hours. And I don't know why, but that's just the reality. So I'm going to have to cut the show, even though I have a lot more to say on this topic, a lot more to say. And basically what's going to happen is I'm going to put a blast intellectual pass after I get done speaking, send this show on off for whenever I decide that it's going to be posted, and then I'm going to roll right into another show, because I try to keep my shows at this point no longer than an hour and 10 minutes. When I do these long 4-hour shows, these marathon shows, that's honestly because, frankly, I have exactly 30 hours of content to get throughout the month. And most of the time, I do not post 30 hours of content. And so a lot of times I make the shows longer as a way to be economically responsible. So I think that clip somewhat says everything succinctly that I need to say on this specific matter. I can tell you what the next show is going to be about, which is this scathing report that I read from the New York Times about the rape and torture, the sexual assault happening to men, women, and children in the Middle East by the Israeli Defense Forces. It broke my heart listening to the story, reading the articles, and immediately watching the journalists who went to the region and did the research be called anti-Semitic. That I think that that's going to end up being a one-topic show. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you on the next episode. I can tell you, just in case you want to hear, this blast from the intellectual past will be from the former President of the United States, one of the great speeches from the late President Ronald Reagan. See you on the next episode.
If we look to the answer as to why for so many years we achieved so much, prospered as no other people on earth, it was because here in this land we unleashed the energy and individual genius of man to a greater extent than has ever been done before. Freedom and the dignity of the individual have been more available and assured here than in any other place on earth. The price for this freedom at times has been high, but we have never been unwilling to pay that price. Those who say that we're in a time when there are no heroes, they just don't know where to look. the sloping hills of Arlington National Cemetery with its row upon row of simple white markers bearing crosses or stars of David. They add up to only a tiny fraction of the price that has been paid for our freedom. Each one of those markers is a monument to the kind of hero I spoke of earlier. Their lives ended in places called Belleau Wood, the Argonne, Omaha Beach, Salerno, and halfway around the world on Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Pork Chop Hill, the Chosin Reservoir, and in 100 rice paddies and jungles of a place called Vietnam. Under one such marker lies a young man, Martin Treptow, who left his job in a small-town barber shop in 1917 to go to France with the famed Rainbow Division. There on the Western Front, he was killed trying to carry a message between battalions under heavy artillery fire. We're told that on his body was found a diary. On the flyleaf, under the heading, My Pledge, he had written these words: America must win this war. Therefore I will work, I will save, I will sacrifice, I will endure. I will fight cheerfully and do my utmost as if the issue of the whole struggle depended on me alone. We must realize that no arsenal or no weapon in the arsenals of the world is so formidable as the will and moral courage of free men and women. It is a weapon our adversaries in today's world do not have. It is a weapon that we as Americans do have. Let that be understood by those who practice terrorism and prey upon their neighbors. As for the enemies of freedom, those who are potential adversaries, they will be reminded that peace is the highest aspiration of the American people. We will negotiate for it, sacrifice for it. We will not surrender for it now or ever. We are Americans.
Broken people, different evils. Lord, I pray I make it through. Lightning, thunder, I'm torn asunder. Lord, I need your heart this summer. I still worry through the storm. Sorry, Lord, I'm not your number one, but I'm calling, hear my voice. Even when I lose my choice, I fall down, but I still believe. You're the air that I still breathe. Through my doubts, through my pain, call your name again, again. But this is my prayer to you. Keep me safe, keep me strong. I know you've been there all along. Save my people, hear my song. Lift us up where we belong. This is my prayer to you. Through the night, through the dark, be the light inside my heart. Don't let me fall apart. Lord, stay right where you are. Lord, stay right where you are. I've been walking through the fire, chasing things that don't inspire. Empty roads and broken dreams, nothing's ever what it seems. Try to fight this on my own, but I hate this road alone. Every tear, every scar, still you love me as I am. When I'm weak, you make me strong. You've been with me all along. Even when I lose my way, you're the reason that I pray. This is my prayer to you. Keep me safe, keep me strong. I know you've been there all along. Save my people, my siblings and loved ones. Help us, Jesus, to your kingdom. This is my my heart. Don't let me fall apart. Lord, stay right where you are. Even when I don't feel you, I know that you're near. Through the silence and the tears, you've been fighting all my fears. I surrender, I let go. You see things I don't know. Write my story, take control. Lead me where I need to go. This is my prayer. This is my prayer to you. Keep me safe, keep me strong. I know you've been there all along. Save my people, here I cry. Lift our hands up to the sky. This is my prayer to you. Through the night, through the pain, wash me clean in heaven's rain. I'll forever call your name. Jesus, you will never change.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Of course, if you want to support the show, you can do so by going to www.patreon.com and getting a membership for as little as $3 a month. Again, that's www.patreon.com/The Jerome McClain Show. The Jerome McClain Show is fully listener-supported, independent media that won't lead you to tribalism. Get a membership and support independent media at www.patreon.com/The Jerome McClain Show.